Greetings. I'm Phyllis Pieffer, past president of MTNA, but I'm here today as a parliamentarian and a member of the National Association of Parliamentarians. When I became president-elect of the Colorado State Music Teachers Association many years ago, my colleague president, Roberta Morris, gave me some sound advice. She told me to join a local parliamentary unit, study, and take the test to become a member of the National Association of Parliamentarians. I'm glad I did. It was one of the best decisions that I have made. Let me take a moment and pull up my slide presentation. In the handout available from MTNA, I have included some brochures and pamphlets available from the National Association of Parliamentarians for members and non-members alike. One of the most important items that I purchased was a set of cards detailing different types of motions, how to handle a motion, the votes that need to be taken, and so on. These are well worth the purchase. I also want to make you aware that the newest edition of Robert's Rules of Order, this is the 12th edition, Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised 12th edition, just became available September 1. And as you can see, I purchased it. I also purchased the Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised in brief, the 3rd edition, which also became available September 1. I must say, though, that I was a little disappointed in the brief version because it only commented in 2 different places about virtual meetings and electronic communication. If you want to really be up to date on those 2 items, electronic communication, virtual meetings, and so on, you need to purchase the newest edition of Robert's Rules of Order, 12th edition. It is available from the National Association of Parliamentarians. I got my copy from Barnes & Noble. Under the electronic communication in the 12th edition, it states this: among some organizations, there is an increasing preference, especially in the case of a relatively small board or other assembly, to transact business at electronic meetings. That is, at meetings at which, rather than all participating members being physically present in one room or area, as in traditional meetings, some or all of them communicate with the others through electronic means, such as the internet or by telephone. A group that holds such alternative meetings does not lose its character as a deliberative assembly, so long as the meetings provide, at the minimum, conditions of opportunity for simultaneous oral communication among all participating members. The 12th edition also has a wonderful appendix on sample rules for electronic meetings that you can use to add to your bylaws. And it is essential that if your meetings are legal meetings, they have to be approved in your bylaws. MTNA also has in its new bylaws a complete article on electronic communication, Article 13, Other Meetings and Protocols, which you may want to look at. Acquiring management and communication skills can be like practicing. And I'm reminded of Arthur Rubinstein's comment, quote, "Every day I go to the piano and I dig a little dirt." So today we're going to dig into how to run a meeting and into Robert's Rules of Order. Now, none of us have probably majored in management or meetings or parliamentary procedures, and many have maybe not even taken a speech class or public speaking 101 in our collegiate years. However, here we are, all involved with trying to preside effectively at meetings. But we do have all of our performance skills honed in our years of practice in our instruments. We also are team players because we've been playing in chamber ensembles, bands, or orchestras, and that makes a different a difference in how we are able to proceed. So let's take a peek inside the board meeting, or is it a board meeting? Are you running the meeting, or is it running you? Let's look at an actual city council meeting. A city councilman yelled out in a fit of rage Monday night against a fellow council member. Standing up and pointing a finger at the other person, he began a tirade. The other council member tried to interrupt, but the councilman continued to yell. My question, where was the chair? As leaders, we are facilitators, the architects of the association, but we are not judges. Tom Landry of the Dallas Cowboys put it this way: leadership is the ability to get people to do what they don't want to do in order to get where you want to go. So what are some characteristics of leaders? And I'm sure, like me, in a weak moment, you have said yes. But we have lots of organizational skills already from our teaching. We're logical thinkers. We use common sense. We have good communication skills as teachers. And we often look for an opportunity to serve. As I mentioned earlier, we're already team players or mentors of our fellow colleagues. We have charisma, we have musical knowledge and ability, creativity and vision, and we place our organization's importance over some of our other activities. So some rules for leadership. First of all, we need to start from where we are at a given point in time. We are gifted with many talents. Each one of us is a very unique individual. We've developed a love for people, or we wouldn't be teachers, and we practice what we preach. We're sincere and honest. We do not sacrifice principle or integrity for anything or anyone. And without compromising those, we learn to compromise without the loss of that previous rule. We take some unwanted jobs sometimes. We take the initiative other times. We make sure we're right, and then we go ahead. And we always remember the kind thing is the right thing. So first of all, we have to know ourselves. We have to know who we are, how we like to work, how we like to interact with people, how we function best, and how others can help us. Are you an introvert or an extrovert? If you're an introvert, come out of your shell. If you're an extrovert, learn to listen carefully. Are you a planner or an innovator? A planner, you plan ahead for the surprises. An innovator handles situations off the cuff. Really, we have to be able to do both of them. Warren Bennis, who is an American scholar and he's an organizational consultant, has said, I used to think that running an organization was equivalent to conducting a symphony orchestra. But I don't think that's it. It is more like jazz. There is much more improvisation. So we need to be able to be both a planner and a visionary as well. If you're a visionary, have your planning team help you with the details. If you're a realist, you need to have some creative thinkers on your board. As a presiding officer, the first thing you need to do is to be sure that you know what the bylaws have stipulated for your position. You need to prepare an agenda, possibly use a consent agenda. More on that later. Or you may use a script or platform book. Many associations are going to what they call platform books. Unfortunately, the problem arises if a situation occurs within the meeting that isn't in the platform book. Oftentimes the chair does not know what to do. Excuse me. As the chair, we need to preside with absolute neutrality. and refer to ourselves as the chair. We need to know parliamentary procedures and rights. We need to use common sense. We always need to delegate and use our board as much as possible. And be sure to have a clock that you can watch the time so that you don't infringe upon the program for the day. Let's talk about some presider effectiveness in other areas as well. You need to dress to catch and hold the attention of members. Many years ago, I was invited to attend a meeting of the AAUW, that is the American Association of University Women. At the end of the business meeting, the chair was introducing the speaker for the evening when all of a sudden, all of us were attracted immediately to the person coming in the door who had on the biggest hat I've ever seen with the most flowers on top of that hat. Trust me, we paid attention to her for the program. No lounging or slouching. Be sure to stand up, and stand up for the meeting, especially if you're short in height. We need to be very careful to be attentive, especially during the debate portions of the meeting. No spacing out. And we need to watch the gestures of members for their physical response, not necessarily their verbal responses. Our objectives of the meeting are to expedite business, maintain order, ensure justice and equality for all, and accomplish the purpose for which the group was organized. Using parliamentary law protects the rights of the majority, the minority, both of whom may be in attendance, individual members, absentees as well, and all of these together. Henry N. Robert himself put it this way: no rules can take the place of tact and common sense on the part of the chairman. So what are some strategies so you can have some productive meetings? First of all, begin on time and make sure that you have a quorum, or if you don't and you know that one or two people are coming in within a minute or two, you could go ahead and start. Send out your agenda and supporting materials ahead of time. Have and use a copy of your agenda or a script. And be sure to stay focused because you are in charge. As I mentioned earlier, stand if you need to command attention and minimize the interruptions. Use parliamentary procedures. Be impersonal. The larger the meeting, the more you need to refer to yourself as the chair. Have your officers prepared. Appoint committees. Remember to recap. We do this in music and you need to do this here. Use your meeting time wisely and follow up after the meetings with your members. Remember that your organization has so many members who are so busy. We need to encourage them to attend meetings regularly, be educated, be able to make motions, debate, and vote, not just sit there. They need to know the bylaws. They need to be a part of the election process. And they need to be responsible as a member of the association. They have lots of personalities. You can see some of them here. The creator, the energizer, the fact finder, the one who's everybody's friend, the questioner who always questions. Delegate to them. Have them serve in their areas of strength. Use them to unite around the common purpose of the association and know the path that the association takes. At this point, I might digress a little bit to talk about the differences between large and small boards. In large board meetings, business is transacted according to the same rules of procedure as for deliberative assemblies. Roberts refers to deliberative assemblies as meetings of people who come together for a common purpose and discuss and work for a common cause. In smaller boards, approximately a dozen or less, the rules apply as far as practicable, with some exceptions. One of the most important exceptions you need to know about is the effect of periodic partial change in board management. In cases where a board is constituted so that a specified portion of its membership is chosen periodically, it becomes, in effect, a new board each time such a group assumes board membership. Consequently, all unfinished business existing when the outgoing portion of the board vacates membership falls to the ground. The individual replacement of persons who may occasionally vacate board membership at other times, for example, due to illness, however, does not have this same effect. In small boards, members are not required to obtain the floor before making motions or speaking, and they can do that while seated. Motions need not be seconded even, but I would recommend still doing this simply for that reason, that then you would know who wants to talk about that particular subject and who might be in favor of that particular subject. There is no limit to the number of times a member can speak to a question. Motions to close or limit debate generally should not be entertained. And you can talk informally about a subject while no motion is pending, and then create the motion from the discussion, and that can avoid making amendments. Unless agreed to by unanimous consent, all proposed actions of a board must be approved by vote under the same rules as in other assemblies. The chair can be much more relaxed in a small board meeting, and you need not rise while putting the questions to a vote. And you can also speak in discussion without rising or leaving the chair. Subject to the rule or custom within your particular board, the chair usually can even make motions and votes on all questions. And it's up to you and your board whether you do that or not. I'm sure all of you are familiar with an agenda. The point I want to make is that there can be an area called special orders on your agenda. It comes after the reports of special committees. Special orders are things which are called for in the bylaws of your association, such as nomination of officers, election of officers. Unfinished business and general orders. General orders are those which have been postponed from a previous meeting to the current meeting. Oftentimes, associations are now going to what is called a consent agenda, or Roberts calls it a consent calendar. To use one of these, the board should adopt a standing rule of order allowing for the consent agenda process and its place in the agenda. It can be used for such things as the approval of minutes, financial report, routine matters such as committee appointments, information reports, correspondence requiring no action, final proposal approval of long-term matters. You distribute the agenda with the consent agenda in advance. Then, if any member requests that an item be removed, it must be removed and is placed on the regular meeting agenda. The consent agenda is approved by general consent. So when we get a motion on the floor, it means we have to do something about it. A member makes a motion, and I really suggest now, especially with online communications, that you use written motions or a whiteboard to facilitate everyone understanding what the motion is. The person seconds the motion. The chair then states the motion, and it becomes the question on the floor. and you debate the question. When the chair notices there may be a lull in the discussion, it's time to ask for a vote on the question or putting the question, and then you must announce the result of the vote. The main motion introduces the subject for the meeting's consideration. It cannot be made when another motion is on the floor, and it yields to certain types of other motions called subsidiary, privileged, and incidental. Let's take a look at these types of motions. First, the subsidiary motions. They assist in the handling of the main motion. These motions are ranked. Notice that the main motion is listed at the bottom, and the motions above them are listed in order of what we call precedence. For example, if someone moves to commit the motion to a committee, it cannot then be amended, because amend is a lower ranking motion than commit. Excuse me. Postpone indefinitely is a motion which can be made right away, which kills the motion for discussion. It takes no amendment and no debate. Amend and commit we'll discuss a little bit more in greater detail later, because those will be ones you'll be probably using the most. Postpone to a certain time is a motion that can be used if your meeting is running late and you want to postpone that discussion to the next meeting. Limit or extend debate limits or extends the amount of time each person can speak and debate. A lot of times, associations are now putting limits or extensions on the debate time in their standing rules. Previous question you're probably familiar with. That's when somebody from the floor calls question. And what that does is it asks for a vote on whether or not to end the discussion and vote on the motion before the floor. Lay on the table I'll be talking about in more detail in a moment. Then we also have privileged motions. They deal with special matters that do not apply to the pending question. For example, call for the orders of the day if you have an agenda that has time limits on everything, and at 1 o'clock you were supposed to start discussing competitions, but it's now 10 minutes after 1, someone can call for the orders of the day, and the chair decides. Question of privilege, the same thing. For example, if someone stands and requests that the windows be closed so that they can hear better, that's a question of privilege. Recess, adjourn, you're very familiar with. Fix the time to adjourn is you have an important topic you're discussing, and the program time is coming nearer and nearer. So you move to fix the time to adjourn to a special meeting at a different time, not the next regular meeting. Other motions are incidental motions, and these relate to the pending business in different ways, and they are not ranked. You might be familiar with already the consideration seriatim, which is where when you're dealing with bylaws, rather than dealing with the entire bylaws as a unit, you deal with it by article and section. And you vote on each one of those, and then you vote on the document as a whole after you've finished all of your work on the articles and sections. Division of assembly. If someone calls division, that means they aren't sure that the vote was really what the chair said it was, and then you have to vote again as a standing vote. Another one might be objection to consideration of question. It's kind of like postpone indefinitely, and it's made right away, and there's no vote even. And it's used to block debate. You have to have a 2/3 vote in order to approve it. We do have 4 motions also that bring the question before the assembly. Take from the table complements lay on the table. If something's been laid on the table, it has to be taken from the table for discussion at a different time. Rescind and reconsider are very particular motions used to rescind previously adopted material or reconsider something previously adopted. And they have special requirements. If you think you may need that motion, you really need to look it up and find out all the rules and limitations of those 2 motions. As I mentioned, the maker of the motion speaks first, then it has to be second. Each speaker, may speak 2 times. You cannot speak a second time if another speaker has not spoken. And unless you have changed your rules of debate, a speaker is limited to 10 minutes. All the remarks must be addressed to the chair, not to other members in the association. And the discussion must be kept germane or pertinent to the motion on the floor. The chair does not debate. Rights of debate cannot be transferred, and the chair has to be sure to state the motion so that everyone is clear on what is being debated. During debate, it's very important that you, number 1, maintain order and your own neutrality. If things begin to get a little tense, you can certainly call a recess, have everyone get a cup of coffee, and then come back to the table and let the tempers recede a little bit. You need to be decisive in dealing with members. Many years ago, I was asked to chair a meeting between the high school band students and the music faculty of the high school. The parameters were that only those people, the music faculty or the students appointed to debate the issue, could speak. All the other students and parents who were in attendance were not allowed to speak. As you may guess, as the meeting progressed, one parent stood up and began talking rather loudly. And so I had to tell that person that they could not speak at this time and to sit down, and if they could not control themselves, I would have to ask them to leave. Well, you know what happened. A few minutes later, that same person rose again, and I had to ask her to leave the meeting. Thank goodness she did. You need to keep the discussion germane to the motion. Use nonverbal language or movement. For example, if someone is beginning to speak for quite a long time, you can stand to indicate that they should get finished. Prepare selected members in advance if you need to, especially on sensitive issues. You need to ascertain when the debate is lagging and present options to members about choices. For example, do they want to send the motion to a committee? And you need to give them information about the voting that they could take. And always remember that speakers direct their remarks to the chair, not to other members who are present. Some other listening techniques you may want to use, or I might say non-listening techniques, is to watch body language and nonverbal clues. If you see a lot of people starting to check out their iPhones and see what their messages are or rustle their papers, you need to be sure to ask if they are ready to vote on the question. Listen precisely and repeat or paraphrase if you need, because if you're not understanding what the speaker is saying, it's very likely there are other members present who do not understand either. Empathize, clarify, or probe if you have to, and listen instructionally. There are a few people you need to watch out for. Agnes, the arguer. Ida rather do it my way. Diana out of this, out of that, who never stops talking. Mabel, maybe we should do this, maybe we should do that. Tina, the talker on anything but the motion. Neville, I will never change my opinion. Thomas, I doubt that we can. And Peter, oh, by the way, the other day. William, will we or won't we? And then there's always Donna the Dominator, who uses debate as a personal venue for her views. The motions that you might use the most of the subsidiary motions are amend and commit, so I want to deal a little bit more with them. On amending a motion is to insert or to add something, or to strike out something in the main motion, or you strike out and insert. You can have two amendments. The primary amendment is germane or pertinent to the original motion. The secondary motion is germane or pertinent to the primary amendment. And you have to vote first on the secondary amendment, then on the primary amendment, and then on the main motion before the motion is adopted. Let's take an example. I move that we purchase a grand piano to be placed in the Maple Valley Community Church for the use of the association. And then someone later moves to amend the motion by inserting the words high quality before the word grand. This is a primary amendment. Discussion continues, and then someone moves to amend the amendment to strike the words high quality and to insert the word Steinway. This is a secondary amendment to the one above. Now let's go on and let's take a look at committees. Committees are either appointed, elected, or volunteer. If it's a planning committee, you want to represent the diverse opinions within your organization. For implementation, you need to represent those in favor. The first named is the chair. Going back to the motion we had earlier, someone else then moves that a special committee be appointed by the chair to study the possible locations and get some quotes from the piano dealers on grand piano instruments and report to the association at the next meeting. Since commit is a higher ranking motion than amend, it can be made while the amendments in the main motion are pending on the floor. And if the motion passes, the amendments in the main motion all go to the committee. The motion to commit was approved and the committee appointed. Another motion is called a question. We have Ida the impatient who calls for the question. She knows how she wants to vote. It does require a second. It's not debatable. It's not amendable. Because it ends debate, it requires a 2/3 vote. If the question is passed, then you go to the vote on the motions before the floor at that time. Another motion that often causes some problems is lay on the table. There's Ted the tabler. Is he laying the question on the table? Is he trying to postpone? Or is he objecting to consideration of the question? Lay on the table interrupts the motion on the floor temporarily to permit doing something else immediately. Otherwise, it's really out of order, and it would be up to the chair to decide whether or not it's out of order. It's often used to kill a motion because it only requires a majority vote rather than a 2/3 vote. It does require a second, and it's not debatable. Voting is those present and voting. We use aye for yes, or no for no, or you could use the actual words, yes or no, if you would like. We have a voice vote, a show of hands vote, rising vote, counted votes, ballots. If it's a tie vote, it rejects the motion. I'll put, unless the chair votes to break the tie, and I'll come to that later. A 2/3 vote is not a majority. A majority is 1 more than half. 2/3 is 2/3 of those present and voting. If someone calls division after a voice vote has been made, it requires the voice vote to be retaken as a vote by the show of hands or by standing. It's not counted, and that's to make sure that the chair called the motion correctly. As the chair, you do not vote on voice votes to preserve your impartiality. You may vote to break a tie vote, or you may vote to create a tie. The chair votes with other members on ballot votes, but then you cannot vote again to break a tie. There are a few items that may cause some misunderstanding. The use of general consent, approval of the agenda and/or minutes with general consent. The fact that the treasurer's report is filed is not approved, and we accept the auditor's report. A lot of people use old business instead of referring to it as unfinished business. And remember, as I just said, the vote is for those present and voting. People who abstain are not counted. Some people I've heard use the same sign for yes and no, and we shouldn't do that on a voice vote. I've already talked about the 2/3 majority and lay on the table. Reports are not received or adopted, they are filed. General consent is a wonderful tool, and it can be used many different ways during your meeting to lessen the length of the meeting. For example, it can be used to approve the agenda or minutes. You say to your meeting members, the agenda is before you. Do you have any corrections or additions to the agenda? Pause. Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Over and done with very, very quickly. Same way for minutes or paying bills, closed nominations, closed polls, reports for information only or committee recommendations, board recommendations, or to respond on correspondence not requiring action. Even adjourning the meeting, you do not have to call for a motion to adjourn the meeting. You can say, is there any business to become before this meeting? Pause. Hearing no new business, the meeting is adjourned. You have to remember to tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you just told them. And no rules can take the place of tact and common sense. Remember your Scout motto, be prepared. Choose your battles. You will never please everyone 100% of the time. Rosalind Carter has said, and I quote, "A leader takes people where they want to go. A great leader takes people where they don't necessarily want to go, but ought to be." And one of my very favorite quotes is from Lao Tzu from 585 BCE. This was written, "A leader is best when people barely know he exists. Not so good when people obey and acclaim him. Worse when they despise him. But of a good leader who talks little, when his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say, we did this ourselves." Thank you so very much for listening to this presentation, and I wish you the very best in your leadership development in your associations throughout the country.